Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review and rant on the 2011 film Sucker Punch, which is a very appropriate title for this movie, because after this film is over, you feel like you got sucker punched in the dick sack. Oh, man. This is the point in Zack Snyder's career where he started to become infatuated with the smell of his own farts because he decided to stick his head up his ass and keep it there. This is where he deluded himself into thinking that he was every bit of a good writer as he was a director. And I know there are people who are fans of this film, and I know there are people who think that I'm dead wrong on Snyder when it comes to his abilities as a writer, and that's fine. I have no problem with that whatsoever. But this is my opinion, and this is how I feel. And this is where Snyder started a slow and really sad decline when it comes to the quality of his films. He injected more politics, he injected more deep thoughts into his stories, and as a result, I feel it was to the detriment of his overall career and to any of the films that he decided to direct. Now, all of that being said, his direction here is good. Zack Snyder reminds me of Rob Zombie in some ways, where Rob Zombie is a good director when it comes to the technical level. He knows how to set up his shots well. He knows how to handle angles and zooms and pans, and he rotates and moves the camera around in ways that are unique and definitely fresh and original and innovative. He has a knack for shooting action sequences or sequences with a lot of epic grandeur, but he's just not as adept or as skilled when it comes to the storytelling. And this is also where he became a little too addicted and a little too attached to his slow motion camera work. And there were times in other films that he did where it was excessive, but it felt like it still had a place and it wasn't to the point where it was ridiculous. And Sucker Punch is where the slow motion was kicked into overdrive, and it was absolutely ludicrous and laughable. I mean, the opening sequence is a sequence that's supposed to be very intense and emotional about a character who her and her sister are being abused by this guy physically and psychologically, and it's shot in slow motion camera work as if it's a fucking music video on MTV. It just does not work. It doesn't really provide more impact. It makes things look too flashy and too slick for something so serious. And that happens so much in this movie. Snyder thinks that he's making his take on Terry Gilliam's Brazil, but really, he's just doing something that cannot possibly hold a candle to that, or films of that caliber. Terry Gilliam is a much better director and writer when it comes to those kind of stories. Zack Snyder is better when he's doing something like Legend of the Guardians or Watchmen or 300, not when he's doing some passion project, because then he thinks that, oh well, now I've made it big and now I can get away with anything, I do whatever I want, and now I can be the main guy who's writing the story and the main person who is handling everything. The directing and the writing, the two main portions of filmmaking. And as a result, get a little bit too egotistical, get a little bit too full of himself, think that he can pull things off that he's absolutely not prepared to do so. I mean, this movie is trying to be deep and talking about abuse and talking about how women, when they're in abusive situations, in order to get away from it, they tend to go inside themselves and so on. And he's just not the right guy to handle this kind of story. And when it comes to these sequences in this movie that are flashy and over the top with Nazi robots and steampunk zombies and dragons and orcs and all this other and robots and shit, that's where he's in his element. Those sequences are well shot. They are honestly pretty impressive. The sequences where Baby is in her fantasy realm with her team and fighting all these foes. Those scenes, for the most part, are really well directed. There are times where it's a little bit too much shaky cam, but other than that, I can definitely say that they are a highlight of the film. So much so to the point that I wish that the film was just a fantasy movie, where it was simply just cheesecake inspired by anime and heavy metal, the animated movie. And it's just a bunch of missions featuring Baby and her team uh, going up against all these different adversaries. And it's over the top and insane. And that's honestly what I wish the film was, instead of this pretentious bullshit where it's trying to be some message movie. And it comes across incredibly amateurish because Zack Snyder doesn't know what the fuck he's doing when it comes to this kind of storytelling. And I love how Zack Snyder tries to say that, oh, it's not just cheesecake and it's not just eye candy and it's not just sexualizing these women in these skin tight outfits. It's you that's doing that. No, it's not. You're the one who still decided to dress them that way. What are you talking about? You're just trying to make an excuse for having the film feature all these women in tight spandex and short skirts, showing cleavage and kicking a lot of ass. And you know what? That's fine. I'd have more respect if you just went out there and did it and wasn't and you did not try to hide it. Try to act like you're doing it as some kind of subversive bit of satire on how a lot of men view women in society. It's like, get the fuck out of here, Zack Snyder. You're not deep enough for this kind of shit. You're the guy who said that Watchmen was one of your favorite comics because it has a lot of nudity and violence. Don't give me this I'm deep and introspective and I'm a philosopher shit. Get the fuck out of here. So, yeah, from a visual perspective, at times it's a little bit too much in terms of the slow motion and the shaky cam, but I will say that's a highlight of the film. Snyder did a good job with the direction for the most part. It's the screenplay where he sucked, where he sucks ass. I'm not gonna say that he's fully 100% responsible for the script's suckitude, because you have Steve Shibuya, who also is on the credits here. Both of them are equal offenders when it comes to this script, because the biggest issue with this script is not necessarily the narrative and the tone, and those are issues, trust me, because the tone is all over the place, trying to be serious and dark, but then trying to be over the top and like a wet dream. But then you'll have moments where it's trying to be dark and gritty, and it's just the tone is very schizophrenic. And the narrative itself just doesn't really have enough going for it because of the fact that I don't give a flying fuck about this story or these characters. Baby is a pathetic character. she just, there's not much to this character. She was abused. Okay, that sucks. That's unfortunate. And no one should be abused like that. But then she goes to this institution, and then she's abused further. And in order for her to escape from that reality, she goes inside her head and has these fantasies. And it's a fantasy within a fantasy. So there's this one fantasy where she's in a brothel with a bunch of other women, and this whole idea about her trying to escape from the brothel and help the other women escape. But inside the brothel is another fantasy when she dances, which is compromised of these really long extended action sequences with Baby doing over the top stuff like fighting a 10-foot tall samurai with a minigun, or teaming up with these other women in the brothel who are now members of a elite fighting squad, and they go up against orcs and robots and all kinds of enemies. And that could be all good and well, but there's no stakes. It never really feels like there's any weight to these scenes because the characterization is so weak and substandard. You don't give a shit about anyone in the cast to the point where these action sequences, which are really long, become boring. They become mind-numbingly boring and dull and tedious, and the film drags and drags. And this is one of those films where, when it comes to the screenplay, it needed to have a central focus. Are you a film that's taking place at an institution and it's being a little bit more serious and dark, or are you some over-the-top epic action fantasy? You can't be both. It doesn't work. The tone is too all over the place. There's too much instances of the tone clashing. And when you have moments later on in the film where, oh no, she willingly gets a lobotomy because it's a way for her to finally escape, and lets that other gal escape from the institution and sacrifices herself. It's like, who the fuck cares? And this isn't earned. It just comes across as try hard. Bunch of try hard, pretentious crap. And there are moments here that also are very different in terms of the genre. So you'll jump from genre to genre. So you'll have action, sci-fi, then you'll have fantasy, then you'll have a serious drama, and then you'll have a musical. Like, pick a fucking genre or pick a fucking tone. Like, what are we doing here? And the musical stuff, yeah, because I watched the extended cut. The extended musical number, Love is the Drug, I thought that was lavish. I thought that was honestly pretty impressive. And it was so good that I wish this movie was a dark, twisted fantasy musical. Might have been better if that was the case. Like something like Repo the Genetic Opera, or Phantom of the Paradise, or something along those lines. Instead of this really random mishmash of drama and fantasy action and one musical number. I love how Zack Snyder, he's quoted here, talking about this movie. He's like, a while ago I had written a script for myself, and there was a sequence in it that made me think, how can I make a film that can have action sequences in it that aren't limited by the physical realities that normal people are limited by, but still have the story make sense, so it's not, I don't mean to be mean, like a bullshit thing like Ultraviolet or something like that. And I find it so incredibly ironic that he's calling out Ultraviolet for being a bullshit movie when the film that he made in Sucker Punch is every bit as full of shit and is every bit a bullshit movie as Ultraviolet is. What the fuck are you talking about, Zack Snyder? How can I make a film that has action sequences that aren't limited by physical realities that normal people are limited by, but has a story that makes sense? The story barely even makes any sense. And when it comes to like action that's not limited by physical realities, that's what an action movie usually is, because it's a movie. You're not making a documentary. And when it comes to the cast, that's another thing that is pretty lackluster about this movie and subpar. I mean, Emily Browning, I thought she was absolutely atrocious as Baby Doll. I'm talking porn star level acting here. Terrible. Like, she's the lead. She's supposed to be the one that has the most emotion, the most uh, charisma, the most personality, and she's got all the personality and screen presence of one of those maquettes. You know, like one of those one of those anime waifu dolls. Like, she has all the personality of one of those. Abbie Cornish, she plays Sweet Pea. She's the one that I would probably say, along with Jena Malone, have the most screen presence, but they don't really have that much depth as characters. So it kind of feels like it's all for naught. Vanessa Hudgens, just nothing here as Blondie. Just another pretty face, really. Jamie Chung feels like another instance of that's going on. Nothing character. Carla Gugino, she's just chewing up the scenery and just being over the top as Vera. Oscar Isaac also hamming it up. You know, ironically, John Hamm is in this, but he doesn't really ham it up here as the doctor or the high roller. Scott Glenn, it was nice to see him as the wise man, the general, or the bus driver, but it's really kind of a nothing role. It's just him being Stick again, or playing that wise old man character that he's done before better in other movies, like The Challenge. Yeah, and Snyder also described the movie as Alice in Wonderland with machine guns. You know, as bad as the Alice in Wonderland Disney adaptations were, uh, I'm not going to say that they're that much worse than this. Because they both suffer from similar issues. Like, they have some nice visuals at times, but honestly, I would say Alice in Wonderland, those movies had even uglier visuals. Like, this had some visuals that I thought were really great and looked great in HD and probably would have looked great in a theater. But there's no investment in the story of these characters, so everything just is empty and hollow. And the music, I didn't think it was fantastic or amazing, but it was decent enough by Tyler Bates and Mary Steve Rise. I thought the score, the soundtrack was better overall. I mean, there were some songs that were a little on the nose, but other ones I thought were actually pretty cool and accentuated the action sequences really well. The cinematography by Larry Fong, it's hit and miss. Sometimes it looks really striking visually. Other times it looks really muddy and just bleh. And the editing by William Hoy is another instance of inconsistencies when it comes to this movie. Just inconsistent all the way around. It's inconsistent when it comes to the direction at times. It's inconsistent when it comes to the writing. It's inconsistent when it comes to the acting. It's inconsistent when it comes to the editing and cinematography. The editing at times is kind of brilliant in terms of what it's doing and how it's handling things and how the editor uh, adds a lot of unique, different perspectives to certain sequences. But then there are times where it's egregious because it's just too quick. It's cut too uh, horribly, as if it was cut with a fucking meat cleaver or some shit. Like, it's just butchered. And it doesn't matter what version you watch. I mean, either version is going to suffer from the same problems, the same pretentiousness, the same issues in terms of investing you in the story. I will say this, the extended cut makes a little more sense, but it doesn't improve upon the film's tonal issues. It doesn't really fix the story to me personally. It definitely doesn't fix the characters, even though there's supposedly more character development. I still don't give a shit about this cast, even though there is supposedly extra bits of character development here. And there's some interesting ideas and concepts at play here. The idea of going inside your head to escape from a dark reality, it's nothing new, but the way that it's portrayed and shown on the screen here is a little unique in terms of the presentation. Uh, but the film hinges upon Emily Browning, and that was a mistake. She can't carry the film. She could barely even carry her own purse. If you think, if based on this performance, she could barely even carry her own purse around the town, let alone carry a fucking movie. And it's just one of those films where, oh, it's trying to be deep and have a lot of uh big, grand subtext and thoughts, but it's about as deep as like poetry from a fucking angsty teenager. It's just one of those movies where it's such a waste. I think there is something here, conceptually, and either it just goes all out and goes for broke and goes balls to the wall crazy with over the top action, and it's just a straightforward girl power, rock'em sock'em fantasy epic, or it's a more serious, dark, twisted nightmare of reality and fantasy with a hard R rating, and has some musical elements. I think that would have been really unique if it was some hard R, insane blend of horror, fantasy, action, and sci-fi, and a musical. And the story was just more straightforward, and it was just she's in this brothel, and that's the reality, not this extra bit where she's also in a institution. No, the reality is she's in the brothel. She was sold there or something, and then the characters that she interacts with in the brothel become her friends. And when she does dance, she does go into those big, huge, grand moments. But then you have aspects of those scenes where they actually do tie into things. And they try to do that. Like, they have a sequence later on where the radio cuts in and out. So it showcases what they're trying to do in that moment when she's dancing. But I would have liked to have seen more of those. And also, you don't need to have the lobotomy shit. Like, just have it where she does find a way to escape, or she sacrifices herself in a different way. You know? Something along those lines. We don't need the fucking lobotomy at the end, trying to make it seem like the lobotomy is a positive. Like, what the fuck? Like, seriously, Zack Snyder? How the fuck is the lobotomy ever a positive? I don't care whether or not you've accepted it before you got the lobotomy. The lobotomy is never a fucking positive. What kind of message is that? Oh, you're strong and you're independent and you go girl, but all that independence is that you accept your fate. You accept the fact that you're fucked with a smile on your face. Like, what the fuck? Like, seriously. Oh, these women are only strong and independent in these abusive relationships if they get out of them inside their head? Is that also the other message you're trying to go with here? Because she never really actually gets out of the abusive relationship, because it's still going on, because she goes from one abusive relationship to the next. She was abused by this priest guy, and then she gets to the institution and she gets abused there. Then she gets abused in her dreams. Oh, so the only way that she's able to escape from abuse is to have a dream within a dream where she's a over-the-top action heroine, and that's what gives her the confidence to accept the fact that, you know what? Okay, I helped this other girl escape. I helped her find a new life. But my life is screwed. So I'm just gonna face it head on. Like, what? Like, God forbid anyone actually take advice from this movie. Like, oh, I'm in a relationship that's abusive. I'm just gonna figure out a way to get out of it inside my head, and if I don't, oh well. That's just how it is. That's the way it is. What? Maybe I interpreted it wrong. If that's the case, so be it. I didn't give a fuck about this story to begin with, so you can't blame me for reaching that kind of conclusion. Um, but I don't think I'm that far off. I really don't. It's just such a weird fucking narrative and such a weird message to get across. Oh, you're strong and you're independent, but you also are dressed like every guy's wet dream. Oh, but you're owning it. But are you really? Because there's nothing in the film that's actually an instance of legit satire of this kind of image. It just shows it on the screen. And it's just eye candy. So just having it there doesn't mean that you're actually satirizing things. You actually have to put effort into the writing. You can't just be like, oh, they're dressed like porn stars in my movie, so that's satire of how men view women. No, you have to go deeper than that. Oh, they were in a brothel, which makes them objectified. No, that's surface level shit. You still have to go deeper than that. You can't just have those things in the movie and that's enough. You have to do more. And that's why Zack Snyder is not a good storyteller and not a good screenwriter and is not the guy who should have been doing this kind of film. If it was his idea, he should have gotten other people from the outside to help him flesh it out, to make it work better. It seems like he kind of tried to do that with Steve Shibuya, but maybe he wasn't the right guy. Either way, this is a pathetic passion project that is a slog to sit through, and definitely does feel like you were punched in all directions by the time the movie finally ends. I don't know what else to say about this movie. It's honestly pretty exhausting talking about it. It's one of those movies where I know it has a fan base and it's gotten a cult following and it speaks to some people, and if that's the case, cool, that's fine, to each their own. I tried to get into this, but all this movie does is punch me and make me want to punch it. So you know what, Sucker Punch? Here's your punch!